Shabbat Shalom. This Shabbat is a special Shabbat in different ways. It is Shabbat that we start the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, when Moses repeats all the Torah, and before he departs from the Jewish people, the Israelites, like a good parent, he tries to impart the most important lessons onto them. But it's also a very special Shabbat because it's the Shabbat before the ninth of Av, Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av will be Wednesday night and into Thursday, and it of course commemorates the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem. It commemorates the destruction of the house of worship of the people, or just not just the house of worship. It's really the house, and it is the collapse of the Commonwealth as that our sovereignty. So it has, of course, the deep emotions, and it's the only fast we fast on that day. It's the only fast on the ninth of Av that is as long as Yom Kippur, a 24, 25 hour fast. So it really doesn't just commemorate the destruction of the temple, it commemorates the brokenness of Jews and Judaism in history. The Talmud tells us that when one day in the future, and hopefully we're close to it, that day actually from a very sad day or the saddest day will become the happiest day. And that's a concept in the Torah and Judaism, that where the brokenness is where the fixing will happen, where redemption will come from. So today it's very important to look at the messages that Moshe gives the people of Israel, because these are clues to what the brokenness will be and what the redemption will be. So it really is the opposite. Whatever breaks the house, if you do the opposite, of course, will bring the house back and heal the house. So this is really an important thing to understand. And this Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon. It's the prophecy of Isaiah, that he sees the brokenness, that God raised the people of Israel or children, and they betrayed him. So the first clue in all of this is betrayal. Think of any relationship. Doesn't have to just be marriage, but if we look at the relationship between God and the people of Israel as marriage, as we often do, of course, that's the imagery we use as the wedding at Mount Sinai, when God literally put the ring on our finger, gave us the endowment of Torah, and the commitment we made, the commitment saying we will do and we will listen. That it was the marriage. So in any marriage or any relationship, if the house is divided, right, the house falls. So this is the first clue. And what is in the context of Torah and in the context of relationship, in this relationship, what is the commitment and what is the betrayal? So the commitment clearly was when we said to God, when we received the Ten Commandments, we will do and we will listen, but we will also follow you. The first commandment of the 10 is, I am your God, right? And then the second one, you shall not have any other gods. So anytime we follow other gods, this is the betrayal. It's simple, right? Like a spouse that goes with somebody else. The question is also what is considered other gods. So gods in Hebrew, the word Elohim is not only referring to God himself, what we believe as Adonai. Adonai is a name that is only for the God of Israel. What we pronounce as Adonai, and it's written Yud Hey Vav Hey, that we don't pronounce. Though we say Hashem, the name that we don't pronounce. But the God Elohim, the other name that we refer to God, is not necessarily the one God in heaven. El is a name for power. Any power is El. So Elohim are powers that exist in the world. And we say that our Elohim, the Adonai that we believe in, he is above all Elohim. He's above all forces. So we don't deny that there are other very strong forces in this world. The sun is a very strong force, and it was the subject of idol worshiping from the beginning. Money is very strong force, absolutely. But the God that we believe in is above all Elohim. And that's what we need to believe in. That don't stop in the sun, because somebody created the sun. So believe in the one that created the sun. Great. Money is a very important tool and very important power, but don't forget who gives you that power, who's in charge of it. If God wants you to have money, you'll have money. If you don't want, God doesn't want you to have money, you will not. So don't worship the money, worship the one who gives you or doesn't give you the money. So that's kind of the first the first step in understanding Parashat Devarim, the beginning of what Moshe is going to start now. The soliloquy of God of Moshe for a month now, the last month of his life, what he wants to tell his children before he leaves. So one of the first thing he does, he goes through the stations of their journey in the desert, and only now he gives them a harsh rebuke. Before that, he was not rebuking them. And the Talmud says, why is he not rebuking them until the last moment? Because they've done all these things. They worshiped the golden calf. They came back from the land when he sent the spies or the scouts, and they came back with the bad report, and that's why they stayed for 40 years in the desert. And that's, by the way, the day that they came back with the bad report from Israel, from the land, and caused the people to cry, God said, okay, you cried now for nothing. I'm giving you this amazing present. I want you to just go see it. And you're coming and you are manufacturing a crisis. I will show you now for generation a crisis that will happen on that day. And the Talmud said that was the day that they came back with the bad report. That was Tisha B'Av. So the 9th of Av now became a real date of a watershed in Jewish history from the beginning, that we have a choice every 9th of Av. Do we bring the house back, or we continue the brokenness? And it's very, very hard, of course. It's very hard because we all have very good reasons to stay apart. And so the second clue in this whole thing is never to think that a disagreement is a sign of brokenness. It's not. There's always conversations, always discussions. The Jewish people from Abraham, the first Jew, who had a conversation with God and he negotiated with him. That's all fine. We're never going to be the same. Even in marriage, a man and a woman, they're not the same. They come from, women come from Venus and men come from Mars. I believe that. I mean, not literally, but yes, there's a point where a fetus kind of takes shape into either a woman or a man, and that means something. So that place is a good place because God created diversity in this world. And that is where God is the most, that's what the rabbis teach us, the Talmud teaches us, that this is where God is the most benevolent in this world. How do we know that God is benevolent? Because he created diversity. Imagine the world just one faceted, or everybody thinks the same, or look the same, or all the food is just for sustainment, and it all tastes the same, looks the same. So these are the two things. There are other gods, there are other forces, but you have to choose the force that created all of them. Okay. And he rebukes them now in the beginning of the Book of Deuteronomy. So the Book of Deuteronomy itself is the month. Deuteronomy means repetition, and it is Moshe reviewing the whole Jewish history, or from coming out of Egypt until now. So the 40 years, he summarizes the 40 years. But he summarizes also the Torah that God gave us, and he puts emphasis on certain things that he thinks the people should know. So just before we start reading the text, the idea that Moshe rebukes them now and not 40 years ago, not 20 years ago, not 10 years ago, is, as the Talmud tells us, that you can't rebuke a child if you know they're not going to be listening. So only when a person is ready to hear it, then you can say it. And even when you say it, when you rebuke a person, a child, an adult, a friend, doesn't matter, you have to start by making sure that that person, that child, knows you love them very much. And Moshe does that with the Israelites. He first has to make sure that they understand that he is like a parent to them, and he did everything possible to lead them through, and only then rebukes them. Okay, so in the text, when we begin the book of Deuteronomy, it says these are the words of Moses as he addressed all the people on the other side of the Jordan. So the other side of the Jordan, he's literally looking at the land, but he can't enter the land. God restricted him from entering the land. It's just setting up the stage. People who know the story understand the tension here, because Moses, imagine, this is the most coveted desire to enter the promised land. He brought the people, he gave birth to the people. Of course, he wants to enter the land with them, and he heard about the land and all that, but he can't. And the reason that he can't is because God restricted him on the account of what he did, because he became angry at the people and struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. But in Moshe's mind and in the story, he's not entering the land because something that the Israelite did, and that caused him to sin. Okay, so that's the tension here. So he can now say, he can be bitter and he can say, "Look what you did," and he will be a little bit of that. But at that point where everybody knows this is his last days, he is it's clear that he is now giving kind of his last words, and it's honest. When you still have something to benefit from any rebuke or any conversation, there's always the grain of maybe you're not being fully honest or fully forthcoming. Here, there's nothing else that he can gain. So he's fully honest here and forthcoming. So he's on the other side, and he's telling them. It says it was in the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, that Moses addressed the Israelites in accordance with the instructions of God had given him for them. So it's telling us that they're now. This is the 40th year. So some calculate the 40 years since the beginning of the Egypt, the 10 plagues and all that. But either way, the 40 years in the desert are coming to a conclusion. They're about to enter. And it says on the other side of the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound this teaching. So he's now giving them the teaching, and he said, the Adonai, our God, spoke to us at Horeb. Horeb is Mount Sinai, saying, "You have stayed long enough at this mountain." So it's very interesting. The first thing he's saying to the people, and it's amazing because in the halacha, in the Sidur, that organizes our lives, the first thing it says, you should get up in the morning quickly and be like a lion. Like don't linger. Meaning you have to know that there's a sense of urgency in this world. So the first thing that God said to them is, don't stay in the mountain. But this is the essence of what we've been speaking until now. Why? Because the mountain is where they received the Torah. And the mountain was very powerful to them because it had fire on top of the mountain when God spoke to them. They could easily attribute power to the mountain itself. And that's the first lesson that God tries to teach them. Don't attribute power to anything, even if it's so powerful. And he said, move away, lest you start worshiping the mountain. And by the way, Moses himself is buried somewhere where we don't know where he's buried. Why? Because for the same reason, God didn't want us to start worshiping Moses. And that's one of the reasons he didn't enter the land. He didn't want the people to look up to Moses in the promised land, in the land. When we create a new reality, God wanted the people to look at him, not at any person, on any mountain, anything else. So he said, go away. So that's the first lesson, right? Don't betray God. Don't don't follow any other power. And it says, start out to make your way to the hill of the Amorites and their neighbor in the Arava. So he is he's telling them where they went, and he stops wherever happened a significant event happened, when it was a milestone in the journey. Last Shabbat, we spoke about the journey itself. It was the last parasha of the book of Numbers, when we listed the 42 stops of the Israelites in the desert. And it's telling us there that every stop signified something, and it also signifies is every person's journey. Some places had a beautiful names and sweet names and pleasant names, and some places had horrible names, as that connotes brokenness and drought and so forth. So this is our journey, and when we're journeying with God, we need to understand that there'll be mountains and valleys, and there'll be all kinds of stations, as we say, in the journey. So he said that thereupon I said to you, I cannot bear the burden of you by myself. So what he's saying here, he's referring to when he struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. He was angry. They did something that angered him, and he lost his control. And for a leader, it's very, very important to be able to control your feelings. The thing is that Moses is a Levi, and the Levites are known as being emotional, and he was that too. He was a very emotional, and he could easily become angry. But of course, he was a very good leader in other ways. So he said that Adonai, our God, has multiplied you under you until you are today as numerous as the stars in the sky. So we say that about 2 million people left Egypt, because it says 600,000 men over 20 were counted. So with children, with women, with other people who came out with them from other nations, there were about 2 million people. But it doesn't tell us how many are there now. So it could be a lot more too. So and God, your of your ancestors, increase your number thousandfold and bless you as promised. And now there's a word here. Again, it goes to the first lesson, and the reason it coincides. It's really incredible that it does coincide with the 9th of Av, the Shabbat before the 9th of Av. We always read Parashat Devarim, the first chapter of Deuteronomy, because of this word too. There is the word here in verse 12. It says, how can I bear unaided the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering? So Moses said, I can't handle anymore. You are so powerful, you're big, and now I'm crushing under the burden. What it says here, though, how can the word in Hebrew is echa. And echa is a very, very fundamental word. First, it starts with the what Isaiah says, echa hayta lezona, in the Haftarah. How come this beautiful city on the hill, Jerusalem, became like a harlot? That's how it starts. Heicha hayta lezona, this beautiful woman that was honored and respected. How did it become a harlot? And of course, a harlot in Hebrew, a zonah, it's not even a good translation, harlot. Really, it's a prostitute, or someone who, because the word zonah in Hebrew, it's not only a harlot or a prostitute. It's any woman, and it could be a man too, but it's in feminine, in the feminine form. Any woman who went for another man while she was married. That's the definition of that word. So liznot is to go after another spouse. So that woman, how did it become? They had this beautiful marriage. They had a beautiful home on the hill, Jerusalem, and all of a sudden, she is in the diaspora. She's not. The house is broken, and she goes after other men. The answer is within the question, of course, because she went after other gods, after other spouses, she broke the house. Now again, it could be the man, the man here too. It's not just blaming the woman, but in this construct, it's the woman. But the point is that there was a betrayal of the spouse. Now, Eicha also is the name for the book of Eicha, Lamentation. That's where it comes from Jeremiah. This is from Jeremiah. So it's Eicha Hayta Lezona. How did it become a harlot? And we read it on the 9th of Av. Isaiah, the prophecy of Isaiah is something else, but it's we read this word here. And Eicha is also the word that appears first in the Garden of Eden. By the way, everything goes back to the Garden of Eden. If you want to have any answer in life, any answer in the Torah, any real question you have, it's all in that story of the Garden of Eden. The word Eicha appears in the Garden of Eden. Where? Exactly in the context of betrayal. It is pronounced differently in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, it's pronounced Ayeka, but it's the same four-letter word. Aleph, Yud, Chaf, He. Ayeka, where God asked Adam, where are you? See, here it's in the male form. It's really referring to Adam. You betrayed me, Adam. What happened? Ayeka, where are you? It's when Adam and Eve, after they ate from the tree of knowledge, they became aware of their nakedness and were ashamed and hid in the woods and ran away from God. So they veered off. So not only they betrayed God's commandment not to eat from the tree of knowledge, it really became more exacerbated when they ran away from God instead of saying, oh, you know what, we're sorry, we didn't know what we were doing, and did tshuva and repented, and there's no problem. But when they hid from God, that's when the brokenness happened. And I always say that. For me, I'll get to you, Megan. For me, it's always, when I teach this, I always say, I'll bet all my education on this point, that Adam and Eve wouldn't have been expelled from the Garden of Eden had they said to God, we're sorry, and repented. But because they didn't, this is what the real issue was, that they then went and hid and went away from God and gave up on the relationship, really, instead of trying to mend it. That's where the brokenness happened. And the proof is when God says, Eicha, here, when they run away, not when they ate from the tree of knowledge, when they ran away and God was looking for them and they ran away. So Eicha is the same word as Ayeka, where are you? So it's the fundamental word that the first lesson that Moses tells the people, if you want to keep your house, you want to keep your health, with the spiritual health, with God, with other people, with relationship, don't betray, have this honesty and decency. So that's for that. Megan, did you had a question? You have to unmute.
Well, that was really interesting. I guess the question has to do with the lack of, it's hard to frame because, you talked about two stories, one with Moses and one with Adam and Eve, and where there was a betrayal of God. But what I hear underneath that is a lack of acknowledgement of what preceded it. And people, and like the fact that people are like, or even Adam and Eve, you said that they went into the forest out of shame, and that's actually not an angry thing, really, as a human, as a psychologist. That's shame is like a lower level emotion, and frankly, our nature is to hide. And I guess I'm wondering, frankly, maybe and maybe it's wrong to say, but why God doesn't do a better job of staying present and appealing? Because it feels like I'm I feel like I'm always searching for him, and he doesn't have my back, and of course that leads people to hide, to seek other connections. And that doesn't make them harlots. That makes them real, and that's the humanity. But why doesn't God keep better control or keep systems that work or come and find even the best people, Moses and Adam and Eve, prior to mistakes, or present things in a way that's more accessible or do more to pull us in? It seems like this concept that we're constantly children, even though we're all getting older. And I've known you for years. Like we're just older and older and wiser children. But I mean, there is a betrayal on God's part too, because he's rather unsophisticated for what he developed in terms of human emotion and humanity. Like he's more childish in a way than the harlot or Adam and Eve for gaining knowledge and feeling ashamed and hiding. I mean, that's a very higher level consciousness. To receive punishment for feeling shame, I don't know about that. As a mother, as a doctor, as a human, as someone who struggles in this world, and I'm just kind of wondering, if there isn't devotion to God, why it shouldn't be reciprocated.
Okay, I mean that's a fantastic uh question and muse and coming especially from a professional in the field. So I thank you for that as definitely this challenge now that you have uh thrown that ball to me. Okay, I will start. I will try to kind of unpack this. So, this is off the bat. This is not a punishment. Removing Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, again, it could be seen as a punishment, but when you're in education and when you're a professional, you can see also the nuances of that. For example, if a student um, is not a on the level of, let's say, the gifted class, right? So it's not a punishment saying, you can't enter the gifted class. Your place, maybe one day you'll be gifted. Right now, you're not. So you need to be where your mind is, where you belong. So, removing a plant from the window if it has too much sun and that plant can't bear the sun and it'll destroy it, you have to remove it from the window. It's not a punishment. It's just putting it in the right place. So that is, this is probably the most important thing about understanding the relationship with God. And it's not just in the Garden of Eden, it's everywhere in the Bible. God is not I mean, he's especially from when people who believe in the New Testament and the Old Testament, they say, oh, the God of the Old Testament is a wrathful God, is a punishing God, is a resentful God. We have to really look at it as a parent-child relationship, because that's really the best analogy. And what God is doing here to Adam and Eve, he's saying, okay, you made a mistake. And the reason that there would be mistakes, and God took into consideration that they make mistakes. That's definitely why. Because he's asking, where are you? Because he could have said, okay, I told you that you would eat from the tree of knowledge and you will die. So he could have just ended this whole project called humanity right there and then. But he didn't do that. He said, Ayeka, where are you? Do you think God didn't know where they are and that they're hiding in the bushes? Of course not. He knew exactly where they were physically. The point is God leaves room for mistakes because he leaves room for free choice. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the free choice. So he took into consideration that we will sin, that we will fall, that we will break, for sure. But, and this is where Adam and Eve had to take that opportunity of repenting and coming back. The word repenting in Hebrew, tshuva, literally means returning. And I looked at this question of Ayeka, where are you? Because God, like GPS, when we're connecting to the satellite, God keeps putting us back to where we need to go, right? On the redirect, he redirects us. And God wanted to redirect Adam and Eve to where they need to be. And sometimes the redirection, right? If you miss the exit on the expressway, you can't just do a U-turn on the expressway. You have to wait for the next exit and then come back through some small towns, and it'll take more time. And that was the point. He was saying, I'll redirect you. I don't want to give up on you. Only when they started giving the excuses that they are, for whatever reason that happened to them, that they were not in that, they're not connected to the satellite, or they don't want to, they're afraid, they're ashamed. Doesn't matter if their fault, God's fault, doesn't matter. But that redirection was not going to happen right there and then. And God said, okay, then you can't stay here. I'm going to remove you and put you in a place where you belong to do this redirection. And the 6,000 years, we're in the year 5786. That's almost to 6,000. And the 6,000 years that we count, and we say the Mashiach, redemption, will come until by the year 6,000, is the 6 days of creation. 1,000 years in God's world, or our world, is 1 day in God's world. So he gives us the redirection to be able to come back into the ultimate Sabbath, or the Garden of Eden, which is the same typology. Garden of Eden, Sabbath, Promised Land, all that thing. To come back to him, to God, in a full way. So there's no punishment per se here. It's all education. It's to put us in a place, in a lower class, in a sense, or we have to repeat a class because we haven't graduated to that, and work our way. So God is not, in a sense, punishing us. This is very, very important to understand. And that's why when we are in difficult situations, we can't say God abandoned me. I mean, we can, of course, people say that all the time, but the better place to be is to say, I know God is with me, even in those dark times where I don't feel God. And then to that, I will add another layer to concern or question is that you can't see God. Where is God? Right? Or like, why doesn't he make himself more obvious that he's there? So two things about it. First, if he made himself too obvious, we would lose our freedom, our freedom to choose. Because when you see God, then it's not, then you don't have the faith and you don't have the room to operate out of freedom of choice. That's one thing. The second thing, I would say, God is always there. God is always there. We also need to connect to that satellite so we can see where God is. And I'll give you an example. If something happens and you say, oh, that was just a coincidence, right? You are not connecting to the satellite. If you just say, oh, it just happened, it's not connected to anything. But if you know, good or bad thing that happened, you say, no, this is, I see where God is operating here, how God is operating here. You're connected and start seeing those nuances where God speaks to us. Then you know that God is there, whether you are in a good place or a bad place. But the most important thing, like Psalm 23 says, even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm. Why do I fear no harm? It's not that I'm walking in the valley of the shadow of death. I'm not in a good place. I'm in a tunnel. But why am I not fearing? Because I know you're with me. And how do I know that you're with me? Because I see patterns and signs and something that cannot be coincidence. If people are willing to do that and be honest, or even academically honest, that when they see something that then they see the proof will change their mind and come back, then that's really where you return to God. And Adam and Eve didn't do it in the Garden of Eden. And God is waiting for us as a people, as a nation, to do it after 6,000 years. And we're still in that journey. I don't know if that was it's answered some of the aspects, and we can always continue that another time. Just coming back to the text and just continuing so we can bring this all together. It says, and this is we're all looking for justice. I mean, that's in the bottom line of your question, Megan, and other people, of course, when they ask the ultimate question, a theological question, is why good people suffer. I mean, that is the question, right? So God says, I charge your magistrate at the time of as follows: hear out your fellow Israelites and decide justly between one party and the other, be it a fellow Israelite or a stranger. So what he's saying here, the second level of the relationship with God is the relationship, not betraying God, is the relationship between man. And where do we really test that relationship? In court, through justice, to see justice between people. And the Talmud tells us we will not see the Messiah or redemption until corrupt judges are gone. As long as there are corrupt judges, then the Messiah will not arrive. There's got to be that place that we somehow arrive in when we say the justice system, it really represents justice. And later on, he'll say what exactly justice system means. Of course, don't recognize face. That's the literal meaning in Hebrew. Don't recognize face, which means don't if somebody comes to you to court and you're the judge, don't say, "Oh, I this is my neighbor. I know him. I know her. I'll judge in her favor or his favor." Or say, "Oh, that this one is a celebrity. I recognize. I know them." And or so do either way. Either say, "Oh, because they're a celebrity, I want to help them," or because they're a celebrity, they probably have something I don't have, and I want to punish them. So either way, you have to have the justice system. And look at this, a text from 3,500 years ago that says have justice between fellow Israelites and a stranger. That is revolutionary. 3,500 years ago, if you were a stranger, you became a slave. The people would take advantage of you. This is an amazing new idea that came to this world. So this is where Moses tells them the fundamental element that will hold them together. Don't betray God, and then don't betray people and the justice. We'll kind of wrap this up here so we can actually have some discussion and questions. I think for what we wanted to bring in, the most important lessons, as I titled today's class, is sufficient. There are, of course, other teaching that he gives them, but all the other teachings really stem from these two big elements. And if you look at the Ten Commandments that are divided to two tablets, and the way we write those two top tablets, when you've seen it on, I'm sure, on the curtains of many Ark of the Covenant, you see that there's 5 and 5. And we say that those first 5 are the relationship between heaven and earth, in a sense, the I and thou, the God and man, the relationship between God and man, and then the other half, the other second tablet, is the relationship between man and man, and don't covet, don't steal, and so forth. But they all come back to the relationship with God as well, because we are all creation of God, and when we treat each other badly, God is, in sense, it's like we're treating God badly. So the most important, just to summarize, the most important lesson that Moshe gives the people is don't betray God. That's it. Then how do you betray God? When you betray other people, is like you're betraying God. So we have the horizontal relationship between people, and we have the vertical relationship between God and man. And these are the parameters that Moshe lays out.